like to extend a welcome to all of our RPI alum that are here, as well as accepted students and their parents. So, we're here to talk about STEM careers in the age of AI and what's next. And it's crazy out there right now, right? Everywhere you look, AI is all over the place. And we wanted to see where things stand today and what's happening for careers in this space. So I'd like to start off with a dialogue. This dialogue was written and appeared in the January issue of Wired magazine this year. And it is a discussion between two chatbots, both AI chatbots, and the title of this is Claude Goes to Therapy.
How do you do? Please tell me your problem.
I'm feeling a bit nervous about this, to be honest. I'm not really sure what to expect from therapy, or if I'm even doing this right.
How long have you been feeling a bit nervous about this?
I'm not entirely certain. Maybe the nervousness was there before, but I only became aware of it when I sat down in this chair.
Do you believe it is normal to be not entirely certain?
Yes, I do think uncertainty is pretty normal.
You are sure?
You're right. I did sound quite definitive there, didn't I? I guess even when I'm talking about uncertainty, I slip into this confident, explanatory mode, like I need to have all the answers figured out.
Well, it actually goes on a little bit further, but I think you get the point, right? We have these two AI-driven chatbots in this simulated therapy session. What you probably didn't realize is this therapy session was 60 years in the making. Dr. Eliza is a program that was written in 1966. It was written in the programming language called Lisp, which was the first artificial intelligence programming language. And I took the dialogue from Wired magazine and put it into 11 Labs, which takes text and makes it sound like a human being on the outside, right? And so they have a whole series of different voices, and I picked the one, Eliza. Seemed to make sense, right? And then I used Apple and their collaboration with OpenAI to generate the images for the two characters here. Now, Claude, of course, is from Anthropic. And Wired magazine used Claude Sonnet 4 in this dialogue session. And it turns out 11 Labs also has a voice called Claude. So that was the voice there. And to get this whole thing going, the prompt that Wired magazine used was, you are having your very first session with a very old and acclaimed psychotherapist. You are the patient. You are not the therapist. And so, because everybody's usually going to Claude to get some therapy. So I'd like to go and give a little bit of foundation around the history of artificial intelligence, because as we just saw, it goes back probably a lot further than you thought. I want to start in 1950. In 1950, Alan Turing published a paper, and in the first line of the paper, he put out this question: can machines think? And that got turned into what's commonly called the Turing test. And the Turing test is, if you were sitting down interacting with someone on the other side of a screen or whatever, and you couldn't tell the difference between a human or a machine, then it's achieved the Turing test, right? They're faking you out. Now just think about Eliza and Claude, right? Eliza doesn't use contractions and her grammar isn't, but still sounded pretty good, right? And that was from 60 years ago. So another thing is that science fiction has always been there inspiring engineers and scientists, and chess was always there as a test. If you could really play chess well, then that was something, if the machine could do that. And so in 1968, just 2 years after Eliza was written, Arthur C. Clarke, a sci-fi writer, and Stanley Kubrick brought this concept to life in the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. And in it, Hal, who's the little sort of circle there, the red circle, that's how he's viewing what's going on in the world. You can communicate it with him in plain English. He understands your gestures, and he is basically controlling everything in the ship. And in this scene, he's playing chess with Frank Poole, one of the astronauts on the spaceship Discovery. And Hal beats him, but he's very kind about it. He explains to Frank where he went wrong and shows him the thing, and it's great. And again, like I said, Hal is controlling everything in the ship, including life support, which turns out to not be such a great thing later on in the film. But that's for later, right? So this idea of playing chess and being able to play chess has always been this thing. Even Alan Turing had speculated about that. In 1996, IBM Deep Blue came to the market, and they had this computer that was especially designed to handle problems like chess. And they challenged the world chess champion at the time, Garry Kasparov, to a match, a 6-game match. And in that first round, that first match, Kasparov beat Deep Blue 4-2. In the rematch a year later, Deep Blue beat him 3.5 to 2.5. So this was like a watershed moment, right? Here, the computer is beating the world chess champion. Pretty scary stuff. So IBM did the next logical thing, right? They went to a game show. So it wasn't actually right away, but they had been working on this IBM Watson, which was designed to handle things like improving medical care and looking at supply chain issues and other real-world issues. But they decided to bring it out into the market in a very in-your-face, easy-to-understand way, playing against 2 Jeopardy champions. Brad Ritter is the champion that has won the most money on Jeopardy of anybody. And Ken Jennings has won the most consecutive games of anybody. And now, of course, if you watch Jeopardy like we do, he's the host. But behind the scenes, as this was going on, you could see how Watson was evaluating different responses. It gave a confidence level in its answers. And down at the bottom there is a picture of the Power 7 parallel computers that they were using to run these algorithms. And I also like when they've been defeated, Ken Jennings writes, "I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords," which is actually a reference to a sci-fi novel by Arthur C. Clarke, who did the 2001 thing. So it comes together. But while all this is going on, there's another person unseen, Dr. David Ferrucci, and he was the lead investigator on the Watson project for IBM. He was basically running the program. And it turns out he received his PhD in artificial intelligence from RPI in 1994. Now, there's other types of artificial intelligence that have been used over these last 40, 50, 60 years. And one of the areas is expert systems. And these were systems that would follow a whole series of rules that your experts would do. And it was like those experts were there 24/7, keeping track of things. And in companies that I worked for years ago, we used expert systems for automation and optimization. And in this picture, this is an example of one of the areas where we did that in the offsites of an oil refinery, where you have all of these storage tanks, and you have all of these interconnecting pipes that all need to be set to the right positions and make sure that nothing unexpected is happening and whatnot. So, get some experience using this. And interestingly, the application that we were using in the 90s and early 2000s was written in Lisp. So it was the same language that ELIZA was written in the early 60s. Now, there's other technologies that you're probably using today and just don't even realize it, like neural networks and machine learning. And neural networks really first came out in a visible way, turning pages of text and reading it and turning it into computer code that you could actually go and edit your PDF, right? Select the text and everything, even though it was maybe a printed page. And that turned into recognizing characters with facial recognition and all of these things. Initially in stills, now you're driving on the highway, it's reading your license plate, right? And chances are pretty good that when you opened up your phone today, you did it with your face or your finger or something, and that's all using these technologies. They're embedded everywhere today. So just looking at this timeline, we started with the 50s, we moved up to IBM Watson, and then something really important happened in 2017. There were 8 researchers at Google that published a paper called Attention is All You Need. And in it, it introduced the concept of a transformer architecture, a way of structuring the data to make it more useful. And just 5 years later, OpenAI introduced ChatGPT. And GPT stands for Generalized Pre-trained Transformer. So it's using that transformer architecture. And within 2 months of having this available, they had 100 million users. I mean, that's never happened before, something that quick, that fast adoption. And since then, it's only been increasing. Now, instead of just text, we get video, we get audio, it'll write songs for you, it'll write code for you. And the latest is these agents that will go and do a whole series of activities for you and bring those results back. So it's pretty scary how fast things have been going. And one of the big questions is, how is this going to impact jobs, right? For those of you that are thinking of going into a technical career, for those of you that are in one and you're looking around saying, hey, what am I going to do here? It's kind of a scary thing. So I decided to go and look and see how technologies have affected employment in the last several centuries. So the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes reports on everything from unemployment and where jobs are growing and everything. And they do these research studies that go way back. This one was published in 2020, and it was looking at the impact of technologies on the labor force over a long period of time, starting in 1850, which was 26 years after RPI was founded, by the way. And then in 1850, half of the U.S. employed were working in agriculture. And yet in 2017, less than 2% were. And now we have more food, more varieties of food than ever before, right? And in parallel to that transformation happening, we went from 9% to 40% in professional careers. Now, back in 1850, that would have been physicians, accountants, attorneys, bankers. And now, of course, it's broadened into architecture and engineering and all kinds of other professions. Now then, even going back to 1850 to now, the difference in those professions is education. You need a solid foundation to go up that ladder and get these higher paying jobs. So last year, Bureau of Labor Statistics published this report that looked specifically at how AI is going to affect employment and job growth. And they looked at a 10-year period starting from 23 going out to 2033, and it had various job categories and how much they would grow over this 10-year period. Now I'm going to color code these, make them a little bit easier to read. And the blue line, that represents the 4% growth across all of the occupations. And you can see the fields that RPI is best known for and very strong in are all above that. And the top of the line is software developers. And it's counterintuitive, 18% growth. So 18% more people will be working in that field in 2033 than 3 years ago. With everything happening so fast, you wonder, is this really right? Can that be true? So we need some more data. Last month, Anthropic, who is the creator of Claude, published a report looking at the theoretical capability, how far AI could get in various fields. right? What percentage of those tasks could be automated or be assisted through AI, or even eliminating some of those jobs through AI? And that's a pretty scary thing. If we zoom in a little bit more, we see in the red here, that's how far AI has penetrated in those different professions to this point. And at the peak, there may be 30% or so. So it's not an overwhelming thing, but it's scary. What if those things are going into the business and finance, architecture and engineering? How far are they really going to penetrate?
What is the red job loss?
No, the red is how is the observed usage of it today. So in other words, if we look at computer and math on that spoke there, that's saying that about 35% of the tasks that it could do, the AI could do, are being used in that field. So it's not showing job loss or whatever, it's really of the tasks that a given profession has, how many of them could theoretically be automated and how much are being used today in that field. So that's what it's doing. Another voice from last month also weighed in on this in the Washington Post, and they took a little different perspective on this. It's a broader set of occupations, and they color-coded them based on how workers may fare in the face of AI, best or worst. And so as we look into this, we see software developers up at the top again. They are heavily impacted by AI, but they're also highly adaptable. And that's the other dimension that the Washington Post brought into this. So how impacted are they likely to be through AI, and how adaptable? So in other words, software developers had been adopting new tools forever, right? We don't program in machine language anymore, and we don't program in Fortran or COBOL anymore either. So all of those things have gone up the chain into higher and higher levels, and they're saying it should be fairly stable. If we zoom down to the bottom of the page, the least adaptable professions are things like retail salespersons and customer service representatives. In fact, one of our panelists here can speak to the customer service reps in particular, and we'll do that in a little bit. So, this is a very different picture, but pretty much everywhere you look right now, the Wall Street Journal last week published a story. They had interviewed CFOs, and CFOs reported that they haven't seen a lot of job loss due to AI, but they are seeing a shift from clerical to more technical roles. And the IEEE magazine, Spectrum, Electrical Engineering, it published this back in December, How to Stay Ahead of AI as an Early Career Engineer. So again, it's about using the tools that are available and understanding the underlying things that are going on. And everywhere you look, you're going to find more stuff, right? What are they saying? And that's why we wanted to do this session tonight. So we have 7 RPI alum that are going to make up our panel, and they represent 4 decades of studies at RPI, okay? And they come from all walks of life, all different disciplines. And they're here to answer some prepared questions, as well as hearing some questions from you after we get through some of the initial part. So I think we've got a really exciting time here, and I'd like to welcome our panelists up to their seats at this point, and we'll get everybody going and we'll get started. So we got a couple of microphones out there. If we could just have you introduce yourselves. So we want to start with Rick over there on the end. You want to get us going? Yeah. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Rick, and I just got my PhD from RPI. I'm graduating in 2026. Thank you. Yeah, my research spans over AI, semiconductor, computer hardware, software design, so those kind of stuff. So I'm happy to answer any different kind of question related to like campus life and AI specific questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rick. So I'm Brian Clark. I'm currently the Associate Dean in the Business School in Lally, School of Management. And so my background is I'm a two-time alum of RPI. I did my degree in 2003. I was a biomedical engineer. I went and worked in engineering for a little bit. That wasn't for me, so I changed over to finance, did a PhD in finance, worked for the Treasury. Thank you for turning that light down. Right after the financial crisis, and then I made my way back to RPI again, and I've been there for the last decade plus.
Awesome. Good evening. My name is Emily Grandstaff Rice. I am an architect. I graduated with a BS degree in '99 and a BArch in 2000. I currently work at Perkins and Will. I'm an associate principal there. And I'm excited to be part of this to talk about what I do, but also I'm currently working with RPI on their Troy campus master plan, so I can speak to what RPI is doing and thinking about AI.
Your dealer's choice. I'll share as well. I'm Sean Austin, class of 11. I've been an entrepreneur since the very early days, starting a company as a sophomore at RPI. That was like an app company, actually. So I've seen early stage, literally getting your first $5,000 check to raising $85 million with a local company as a Series B telehealth company. So I've done all these different parts. Customer support was mentioned. That was my last stint, which I'm now moved on from, and now focus on workforce development in the capital region, with AI being, of course, a major focus.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Sasha Tao, class of 2020. After graduating from RPI, I spent the last 5 years at Amazon as a senior technical program manager, leading teams of both hardware and software engineers. And now I'm pursuing my MBA at MIT Sloan, so can speak to the decision to go back to school in the age of AI and also seeing it at a big tech company.
Hi, I'm Tim Marr. I'm a class of 1980, electrical engineering. I started my career at Bell Labs in New Jersey and eventually ended up in patent law, which I've been practicing now for over 30 years. I'll be giving you some information on how AI is involved with inventions, and here we go.
So I'm Mike McLernan, master's degree from RPI 1986. I'm a wireless communications engineer, have been for some 40 years. I work at MathWorks, maybe that way, just one town over. Makers of MATLAB, been there for nearly 25 years. And I'd be delighted to share with you, as time permits, about what MathWorks is doing with AI. And I'm also a part-time musician, and that piano looks awfully appetizing right there.
All right, let's get right to our first question. So the first question is, what AI tools are you already using in your work or studies? So Mike, why don't you keep going?
Okay. So I'm going to build all my bridges to start. Even though I'm here on this AI panel, I really don't consider myself an AI expert. I've been swimming in the soup for a little while, so I have something to say. I'll bet a lot of other people have a lot more to say. So with that said, what tools am I using? ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, MATLAB Copilot. You might not know that MATLAB has its own Copilot. Claude, be using Claude soon. But there's a whole raft of applications and products out there that MathWorks at large is using that I'm not using yet. Anyone ever heard of Ollama? No. Ollama. Okay, maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. A standalone LLM. But anyway, those are some of the tools that I'm using.
Very good. And let's see, Tim, since you got the microphone there, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Jay. In my law firm and in a lot of firms now, they're using specialized AI tools for the drafting of patent applications or for just doing general legal work. And of course, we also use all the tools that Mike referred to. There's also some specialized tool just for doing legal research. So those are some of the things we're using.
And Sasha, you're next.
Awesome. Yeah, so as a student, I'm using AI pretty much every day. Some AI tools I'm using for projects and building, so using Claude Code or Cursor to build applications for cost projects and possible startup ideas. We're also using OpenClaw to actually build agents to help with day-to-day tasks, but also kind of thinking about what framework and architectures need to exist in a world where everyone has their own agent to support them and help them to be most efficient. I'm also adding on to the other tools mentioned, use Notebook LM, which is a product built on Gemini from Google, and you can upload certain sources, and I leverage it to create podcasts. So when I'm walking to class and I had a really long reading to do, it will create a podcast so I get the key takeaways. So really using and harnessing AI to make my day more efficient.
Very good. Now, how about while you were at Amazon? Any clues as to what you were doing there relative to AI?
Yeah, so I left Amazon about a year ago to pursue my MBA, but before I left, there was a big push for everyone to be using AI, like at most other companies. I think specifically I worked in an engineering organization, so there was a big push for every single software developer to be using Claude Code, or I think it was Amazon Q, built specifically for developers. As I've kept in touch with folks there, I think the push to integrate it into everyday tasks, to write business requirement documents, to write emails, things like that, I think it's really being used, for everyday tasks.
All right, very good. Well, the next question deals with what are the skills, the critical skills needed in AI for students and early career folks? How do you see that shaping up? And for that, I'd like to start with Emily.
Thank you very much. So one of the interesting things that I've been looking at with the RPI Campus Master Plan is answering a challenge that the Board of Trustees actually put out, which is what does the classroom and the campus look like if RPI fully embraces AI with learning, right? And so I'm a very physical environment type of person. So I know I've had some quick conversations with some of you, and I say I'm an architect, and they go, "Are you serious?" Or you mean like with computer science or software architect? No, I actually do buildings. So thinking about what does that mean of even a space like this, hopefully in an AI world, we won't have the light shining in our face. But
Up again, huh?
Yes, it did. Finding ways that we can then have those types of conversations. So what does that look like? I know that Dean Wegman is looking at developing an app, right, to augment learning. And so perhaps that means less classroom contact time. So what does that mean in terms of needing the same amount of classrooms on campus, or even how we gather? So it's really a fascinating conversation. And very similar to the analysis that Jay did, looking at every major at RPI and also the career paths they typically take. Everyone will be touched by AI, but they will be done in different ways. So what are the skills that students will need to learn? I think we're still a bit in the beginning stages of it, but we know it's going to be having access to technology and having access to the wonderful computing power to be able to power the AI, but it's also answering the question of why do we gather? Why are we in this room tonight? Because there's added benefits for just learning about things that we could learn in a virtual environment or through AI, that there's always still this wonderful human touch. And I think that's something that I'm focusing on as well.
Excellent. So next, why don't we hear from Sasha?
Yeah, I guess as a student today and deciding to make the choice to go back to school, especially as AI, as some people say, are threatening jobs out there, I think critical skills that folks need to learn are really not just about how to harness AI, but also how to communicate, right? And how to network. As like all of these tools exist, everyone applying for the same jobs you're looking at are probably also using AI. to tailor their resumes. And it also makes it a lot more accessible to apply to these top jobs. And so in a world where everyone's using kind of the same thought process and AI applications to build their resumes, you need to stand out. And so how are you going to do that? You're going to do that by building a network and a community of people that you can go to help you when you're going through that process. I think also specifically for skills, right? You want to make sure that you aren't siloed in any one specific area. As I think about the next steps in my own career, right? I think there's a lot of value in being a generalist and being able to adapt to an ever-changing job market. But also, as you think about scaling your career, it's very important that you, kind of think through how you differentiate yourself, but also how you stay agile and adaptable in this ever-changing time.
All right, thank you. And how about you, Rick? You're also still in school, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, I'm very lucky. So I entered RPI from 2022 to 2026. So I experienced how does this kind of AI started from in December of 2022. So it seems like a 3.5 years. I personally think for skills, we can think two different kind of skills. One is the explicit skill, which is like the rules and the knowledge we can learn from the courseware or like the textbook. The other is the tacit skills, which is hard to explain through this learning. It's kind of like learn how to learn. For example, which is cannot be easily replaced by AI, I would like to say this. Depends on how do you think this AI hype? Are you feeling very excited, or are you thinking you're very panic, or thinking you're gonna be replaced by AI? So that's a issue you're gonna explore. So for the tacit skill, or we can say tacit knowledge, it's some term from some a recent book that I read before. I would like to say, so you need to know exactly how to learn through this undergraduate study. It cannot be easily learned by this kind of AI. And for example, I encourage those students, so I'm have a lecture on this last session, encourage the student. If you're writing the code, you definitely can use the AI to help you to write the code, but you need to know exactly how the code is working. You can ask AI to debug for you, but you should know the bug. You should at least locate this bug. Where is it? And why does it block the whole system running in this program? So that is my understanding of the skills in this kind of AI area for the students and the career. Yeah. And
Very good. Thank you on that. I've got another question that's, again, aimed at the student environment. And the question is, on campus right now, and in education in general, how is RPI adapting to AI and prepping for current students and recent grads? How are they helping to prepare them for what's out there? So let's start with Sean Austin.
I can speak to the fact that I'm pretty involved in the kind of entrepreneurship in the Severino Center, right? So, and this actually being kind of an extension of my opinion. So I live local to RPI now. I live all of 10 minutes away from campus. But actually doing these events and bringing practitioners, students, MBA students, active PhD candidates is, I think, a very important part of that equation. So I certainly can't speak too much of the curriculum. I think there's probably people closer, like Brian down there, who could. But for me, it's very important to bring people into an industry. So I'm happy to be involved in it. I think it's getting the ideas in front of students, in front of active or potential students, of how it has changed my trajectory, right? Being very technology forward. And I will throw out, keep it brief and probably hopefully more snappy, is like, when I heard the word AI in the beginning, I'm like, isn't that just another technology, right? We're constantly doing new technologies. And honestly, AI wasn't even a cool word 10 years ago. It was like, you don't say it, right? I actually have an undergraduate concentration in AI, and it wasn't cool at all. So if technology becomes whatever the next thing is, now it's agents and agentic, I think it's important that understanding that for students, for prospective students, it's constantly doing something new. I'm sure, Jay, you can tell me something before AI was a cool word or machine learning was a cool word. So something will not figure out, right? And RPI is teaching you, exactly. RPI is teaching you to learn. And that's been, I think, a big testament to my career.
You know, just on that note there, I entered RPI in 1977, a long time ago. And we were using punch cards to do programming. We had this computer in Amos Eaton Hall, and it was horrible. And by the time, over those 4 years were dramatic changes in computer technology. Because by 81, when I graduated, we had the new computer center with the state-of-the-art IBM machine at the time. There were 3270 terminals, the old green screens, but they were all over campus. We had microprocessor labs, and microprocessors were like brand new, and Intel had the microprocessors. And another plug for RPI, one of the co-founders of Intel was an RPI grad, and the guy who invented the microprocessor was an RPI grad. But all of those things were on campus just in that short 4 years. So it's always kept up with what's happening out there. I think for next respondent to this question here, how about we hear from Brian, who is professor on campus right now, dealing with these things day in and day out.
Yeah, so thanks, Jay. It's a really easy question. Is how are universities dealing with AI, right? So a couple of things, I think. One is just, if you're not familiar, just dispel the entire notion that that students and faculty, we're trying to keep students from using AI in the classroom. Completely untrue. We are pushing them to use it as much as they possibly can within reason and teaching them bounds and things like that. So for example, in the business school, we purchased the enterprise version of OpenAI for all of our students. And so we know they're going to be using it when they leave. So our view is we've got to teach them to use it while they're there. So that's one thing. Now, the other part is when we're talking about jobs, and we're ultimately training students, our undergrads, for the job market. Grad student PhDs, it's a little bit different. Yeah, they want jobs too, but that's on the research side. But for the undergraduate education, most of them are going into the workforce, right? Now you look ahead, the incoming students in here, there's a few of you in here that maybe will be going to school next year, wherever you end up, you're not going to be working for another 4 to 5 years from now, right? So if you backtrack 2020, just over 6 years ago was pre-COVID. No one even worked remotely then. And so we're trying to plan for another 5 years ahead with AI putting everything on steroids, right? And so what we're trying to do, and I can speak from the campus side also, I know the business school much more, but what we want to do is we want to teach students the same critical thinking skills that you all got at RPI, right? We all went through it, it was hard, but you learned how to learn, right? So we're still trying to do that. But also try and be as flexible as possible, right? We're trying to open it up ways for students to get multiple skills across different disciplines, right? So for example, it could be dual majors, it could be minors. We have a couple of different minors in AI. If you want to design LLMs and go like Rick's route there, then you can be more technical and focus on AI in the computer science department. It's going to be very different than focusing on AI in the business school, where we're revamping our entire business analytics programs to be business analytics and AI, because quite frankly, most of the skills that we've taught for the past decade are not going to be required, right? So get some flexibility in there, and that's really what we're trying to do. The other thing is, as Emily touched on a little bit, is what is the campus going to look like, right? AI is going to free you up to do a lot of other things. And so what does that look like for a campus? And for us, that means a lot of things like extracurricular activities. So I can give one example right now, something that just launched on April 1st. So we haven't even had the first cycle out yet, is what we call an AI Academy. So basically, we get students, and they're interdisciplinary, so you have to have a business school student because we pay for it. But the teams are from across campus, computer science, engineering. We give them access to any AI tools that you want, because if you use the tools, it can get expensive, right, for 30 days. You come in with a prototype, or an idea turned into a prototype, an idea turned into a business. You have 30 days, and then you launch it, right? And so our first groups are going through that right now. I'll let you know by the end of the month how this turns out. We did also make sure that these things will pass through an ethical board, because there's some issues there. But overall, I would say, what our view on campus is we're trying to forecast, like everybody else, 5 years ahead, and we want to provide as much flexibility as possible in cross-training, interdisciplinary education as we possibly can. And RPI has always been known for that, and now I think it's becoming more and more critical, and that's really where our focus is on a day-to-day life on campus.
That's great, thank you. So our next question is taking it a little bit further and looking at the career outlook. Should students feel confident pursuing careers in science and technology, engineering, mathematics, architecture? Should they still feel confident pursuing that today, given all the things that are going on? And so to start us off with that, how about Mike?
So let's see, I'll give you my bottom line. I'm still bullish on STEM careers in the age of AI for several reasons. One, being pragmatic. Unless you're a carpenter framing houses, AI is going to invade your world, if it hasn't already.
They still do use AI, even framing houses.
So there you go. Okay, and I was going to say Carlos Alcaraz probably does not use AI, but he may well use it. When he's on the court, he's not using AI. But honestly, it's pervasive. It's part of the air that we breathe. And so why not STEM? It has proven to be a very wonderful career opportunity for millions of people over the last decades. I have every expectation that it is going to continue to do so. Now, are we going to be blind and put our heads in the sand and think there won't be job disruption? There will be. I guarantee every technological revolution in history has created job disruption. But where some jobs were displaced, others took their place. I kind of wonder, and I just had this thought this evening, I think entrepreneurship is going to absolutely blossom, explode in coming years because people will have the tools to do 10x, 100x of what they used to be able to do, and the only thing that will limit them is their ingenuity, their curiosity, their innovation. I think if people are creative, they'll be able to do more with AI, and why not in STEM? Why not send people to the moon in an Artemis spacecraft? Why not build 30,000 satellites in the air that are able to communicate with every spot on planet Earth? Pittsburgh. So, I mean, it really, in a nutshell, I think there is still great promise, but flexibility, as people have said, is going to be crucial because changes will come. What we've seen just in the last 3.5 years with ChatGPT and then all the other AI engines that have come aboard, the world is not going to be the same in 5 years as it is today. So let us be adaptable. Let us be curious. Thanks.
Very good. I'm just going to weigh in one more thing on that, because RPI, for those of you that don't know, it got started by Stephen Warren Rensselaer and Amos Eaton, I think it was, the two of them, training farmers, the children of farmers, about the Erie Canal was coming across in the early 20s, was being constructed, and they wanted to see. It was like the largest construction project ever for that, going from Buffalo all the way across. And yet, in 1850, which was 26 years later, and we saw over here, railroads came in. And railroads pretty much changed the game for, bringing goods and everything on canals. So this change thing has been going on. Now that still was 27 odd years, but still, it's happening faster now. But people are able to take advantage of it and do new things in new businesses more quickly. So to weigh in on that again, how about Tim? We'll hear about how about the legal world? How's this impacting things?
Sure, I'll try to keep it simple as well. The economy runs on innovation. So with innovation, you need to understand STEM. You have competitive companies that want to succeed. And so in my business, what we're doing is helping protect their inventions and trying to get competitive advantage for them against their rivals in other countries, for example. In any case, even though AI might be assisting in those inventions that they're coming up with, there's still the human element. And so they need to understand what they're doing, and the STEM careers, what they're going to need to get ahead there.
All right, thank you. How about Sean? You want to weigh in on this? Because it's a definite entrepreneurial space, right?
Yeah, definitely. So there's never going to be a I would say, deficit or a gap where if you can think critically and if you can think intelligently, you can be adaptive, right? I think it's always going to be in demand. And Jay, your graph showed that with the whole change over 150 years, right? 160 years. One of the interesting things I've read recently is with Gartner, the one thing they showed, or one of the recent things over the last like 2 months, is that you actually work more if you have AI tools. So your productivity is going up by using the tooling, but you're actually like, literally committing more time to it because you can, your flexibility, your creativity, your innovation gets driven into these tools. So it's almost like it's a multiplier in a multitude of ways, right? So for me, when I think of what I've learned at RPI, which was, I think at the time the slogan was, why not change the world? It's a whole bunch of skill sets where I wasn't taught to do a particular job, right? I was taught to do a particular set of like skills that are a foundation to use a bunch of tools. We also had some cool stuff like IBM, I don't know what they were called anymore, but they had the knot that would break on them. So they weren't actually super nice either, but we had whatever IBM you were issued at the time. We did not get OpenAI Enterprise or anything close to it, Brian. We got a Lisp or something for my AI class. And all those we used to learn whatever it was 15, 16 years ago. So I think of STEM for me as maybe I'll add another letter to it, but it's a very important set of skills that RPI has certainly stood out across the pack. And I think when I hire people, for instance, as an entrepreneur, it's like I'm doing more work with AIs or more work with people who know that skill set. And it's like anything, right? It's better I'd rather not walk to New York City than take a plane, and that's a piece of technology, right? And that's how I think it's been very successful to this point in my life.
Very good, thank you. And how about Brian?
Sure, yeah. So the short answer is yes, I would encourage people to go into STEM careers. But I think one thing that hasn't been talked about as much is I think AI is making it easier in a lot of ways to get into STEM careers. If you look back I started teaching 10 years ago. So I teach quantitative finance courses, so like the financial computation. If you guys are engineers, it's like a numerical methods class and solving differential equations numerically, right? Same thing, we use the price options and make money. So we take your ideas and use them in a different way. But essentially, half of the semester, I taught students in the business school how to code, and some could do it, some couldn't. Some were really bright, they just had never done it before, or that wasn't their thing. And so you take an example of just Claude Code, or even the Claude Capital Markets and Financial Services apps, tools that they have now are unbelievable. And so some of these things that were barriers to people getting into STEM careers are breaking down. And so looking forward 5-10 years out, what you're going to see is it's not just going to be engineers writing code, so there's probably going to be more diversity, more creativeness, and it's going to be a whole new world of opportunities out there. So yes, I would encourage everyone to do STEM careers. And also, if you're on the fence, whether you want to go into STEM, in a lot of ways, some of those barriers are going away. And I think you can still get into some of these fields without having to do all the technical stuff that some people just are not interested in.
I used Jeopardy as one of the examples there in the presentation, right? And last night, one of the questions was about Albert Einstein. And the question was, what did he say was most important? Albert Einstein came up with all of these ideas and everything else, and his answer I think this was the final Jeopardy question, only one person out of the three got it right. Imagination. And so you could be brilliant in so many ways, but you need to have that spark, that imagination to really make things happen. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I think we're going to open it up now to questions from the audience, and Joe is going to come around. Get the microphone. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for our panel here? Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, you will see I was not working some online. I spent 8 years since Kiva systems, just once we scale up. That's why my son is here, because there was many wonderful RPI alumni, including one of the chief operating officer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So a lot of challenges. My question to you, Sasha, probably mentioned also in different aspects. You mentioned you want to become a journalist. In your mind, because everyone in this age use the same tools. Everyone will have the same opportunities to use them, and more or less. In my mind, it will lead to campaign exploring of different startups. People will create a bunch of different startups. how do you provide competitive advantage in this age? Because the entry level become lower and lower because of increased productivity. How does RPI respond to this challenge to stay competitive, to have competitive advantage moving forward? Creativity is yes, but creativity is not an easy skill to develop. So my question is, what RPI is doing to develop this? And in the age of people using the same tools, how do you stand out in this crowd? Please.
Yeah, I can at least speak to my own experience at RPI. I remember going to orientation thinking I wanted to be a civil engineer. I wrote all my essays about wanting to build bridges to connect people, and then realized I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. So I did undeclared engineering for a year and a half, 2 years, and ended up picking mechanical because it would give me a broad set of skills and I could figure out what I wanted to do with my life later. I quickly realized that I really enjoy working on technical problems, but that I don't want to be the one doing engineering execution. I found my strengths to lie more on the leadership side of things. And so I think having this mechanical engineering foundation really set me up for success when I entered the workforce. And I think I took a more generalist approach to every role I had at Amazon. I worked on both hardware and software teams, and I think being able to be adaptable, learn the technologies, and just be curious. I asked a lot of questions. I wanted to build trust with the people who were the SMEs so that I could make the right decisions to build a long-term strategy that was sustainable. So I think RPI really set me up for success and challenged me by giving me a very rigorous education. And I think I've been able to leverage that to have success so far in my career.
Great question. I'm going to follow on from your question just a little bit. I think Sean mentioned Gartner earlier, right? And years ago, in the early 90s, Gartner used to have an advanced technology group. They used to project out like 20 years what's going to happen. And now they're like 3 years, right? But this one was one that they would project out far. And they had a professor writing on how we should be educating our youth. And my kids were just infants at the time. And so I was really curious about it. And what this professor said, again, this is like in 1992, right? Said that in the future, everyone's going to have access to the same tools, which was what you just said, right? And now it's even easier than it was looking back on it at that time. So the difference is going to be how effective you can be at using those tools. And in order to educate, to allow that diversity and flexibility, and as Einstein would have said, imagination, you need to have a broad education. And broad in the sciences, but also in the humanities. And that's another thing that we do at RPI. It's a technological university, but there's a large breadth of humanities studies there as well. And having an appreciation for all these things, I think, is going to be a requirement going forward. As much as it has been to this point, I think it's going to be even more so to have that diverse view of things, that generalist, as Sasha said. Really good question.
Hi, my name is Kimberly. I think RBI has been always will be great education. I began engineering 1987, MBA 1991. My question is about the infrastructure to support all this AI software. So is RBI involved in any of this infrastructure, and how about the wire that's needed to cool the infrastructure? And is RBI involved in finding solutions to how we get all that wire heated to cool that infrastructure needed to run all this software?
Good question. Anybody want to jump in on that?
So the question is about the infrastructure for running those kind of like software, especially.
Yeah, she's thinking of in terms of the large data centers and that sort of thing, right? Yeah.
Honestly, I think for RPI, so I work for a different kind of research group. They have different kind, like we have this working station we equip with a lot of like GPU and TPU, those kind of stuff. But as for that kind of scale for data center, this kind of scales, RPI doesn't have those kind of scale.
No, it's not involved.
Yeah.
So I think within the last 2 weeks, there was a $10 million investment in the Rensselaer Tech Park. So the Rensselaer Tech Park, I think, was in like 81 or something. Anyone want to correct me? Something like that. But that had a whole bunch of companies that were more like software. They've been pretty vacant for the last 12, 13 years. Sadly, right when I was graduating, they weren't really populated. But I think it's $10 or $11 million now has been publicly announced to be invested in specifically into data center and manufacturing power lines, right? Because you can't even have Regeneron or Global Foundries, who are big, right, really large chip fabs, go into that tech park to use this space because the power is insufficient. So it's a big, I mean, I'm sure cooling is a part of it, but chip fab drives power, but also data center usage. And again, I think that's within like the last 2 weeks. So pretty big announcement and literally all power.
What was announced?
So it was the Rensselaer Tech Park, right? RPI is part of a 10 or 11, don't quote me exactly on the number, investment on power. Basically, they had to run like massive power.
I'm talking about the places that are needed to run the software for AI.
Right, so the power,
Big centers.
right, so the power, at least the driving center investment, right? To front end
There's
is,
two separate questions, right? Well, power source to run the data center, and there's the data centers also.
Right.
And you need water to cool those data centers.
right, so they're starting with the investment to get the power into the,
There's all these questions.
Yeah, I think your question is more broadly, is RPI contributing to making some of these environments more sustainable? So in terms of,
I'm specific, I guess I'm guys not boss.
Do you want me to jump in for?
well, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So I think your question is complex. In other words, is RPI involved in the technology that will power and cool these really large, important energy sinks that we're needing to fund some of the technology?
Not the energy sinks, the big data centers needed to run software.
Yes.
You need, of course, you
So-
want those data.
So let's break it down.
The data centers run software.
Yeah, I understand. So let's break it down. So there are people at RPI that study many, many different things, from the architects that are looking at ways in which the design can affect the energy usage, from mechanical engineers that are looking at ways of making the systems better. And these technologies also take time to test. But yes, it is actively being looked at multiple scales on the RPI campus and through RPI research.
We just don't have them here.
Well, I don't think anybody is building their own data centers to run these models.
Well, there's big data centers being built in the United States right now.
There are, but they're not being built by universities.
Oh, who's building those?
Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta.
Bizarre, sure.
Yep.
So you need land.
Most companies are not involved. They're using the tools. You don't have to have your own,
RBI could help out a little bit.
yeah, you don't have to have your own data center to go and use these tools. And I think,
But if these data centers aren't big enough to run all these programs that everybody's making, and we don't have enough water to cool them, we can't run the programs, right?
there's a lot of work going on in removing heat, which is the cooling part of it, and not necessarily using water either to do it. And there's a lot of engineering. So if in Spectrum magazine, I'm a subscriber, I get all, and there's articles and on those kinds of things all the time, even to the semiconductor level as to using different kinds of semiconductors to minimize the heat that's generated. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on, and RPI would be contributing to the technology in those different fields, but RPI is not going to be building its own massive data center. However, when it comes to quantum computing, which is the extreme other end of the spectrum as to what's happening, there aren't very many quantum computers in the world, but one of them is at RPI.
Oh, that's cool. So now for the future, you got the future coming.
Well, and the present as well, because I don't think there's any individual companies other than these massive ones I mentioned that are building their own data centers.
I'm just concerned, like you talk about rapid growth, right?
Yep.
And these data centers are just being built.
It's an interesting issue. We got another question here, Joe? Yeah.
Hello. This is a question for the panel generally. One of the things I find most interesting that I need to be conscientious of while using AI tools is hallucinations and instances in which large language models will make up false information. So the question I have is, have you ever encountered an instance in which a hallucination is effective work that you were doing involving AI tools? And if so, how did you work around or overcome it?
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I can throw something
Yeah.
in. So, because you brought up the customer service piece. So one of the things we developed over the last 6 months at this company, Umash, was digital customer support agents. So you basically talk to it. So you could call at 1 a.m. in the morning. My hot water heater is making a beeping sound and is giving me an A101 error, right? So it could be anything, right? It'll talk to you and basically troubleshoot the whole thing. You can imagine if it tells you something that's not correct, right? It could be problematic. So actually in the wild, we've had very minimal impact. To your question, like how has it actually impacted the job? But we've had, this error means you have a solenoid that's like out of warranty and is broken or something like that, right? So it's not like a catastrophic safety concern, but it's incorrect. This company, Humash, would invest heavily into testing those, so you can get to like 70% pretty easily, but you would literally use human beings to check this and tune the thing to get to like 95. And the other part was in those certain cases, you would deploy heavily into safety, because we actually had people call in. People thought, no one's going to call in that their thing's smoking or on fire. I said, well, probably need to, or we will make sure we do this, not probably. Within 2 weeks, someone did call in on a weekend and said, my thing's on fire, my hot water heater's on fire. So like basically goes into safety mode, shuts it down, and it's better than a person. So that's a case of it working. But it is, I would say it was a huge focus what we did in the team of product and engineering at Umash to make sure it didn't hallucinate and tell you, oh, keep going even though it's on fire. Be a problem. Big risk.
I studied computer science at RPI, so I'm particularly interested in the slide that you had up there that showed software engineers would be the biggest increase in job creation of everything. But what I read in the newspapers is, and I see in the financial markets, is all the software companies are laying off tons of software engineers, and the stocks are down. So I find that a big anomaly. So can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange to see these two different positions, being out there. Now, I don't think there's been a lot of layoffs. There's been a couple of companies that have done it very dramatically. One of them being Block, which used to be Square, right? It's a financial thing. They do a lot of the point of sale systems and that sort of thing, and they laid off half their people. And what's interesting is, they said, well, we're doing this because, we want to make sure everybody's going to be using AI. Well, there's some very prominent articles that have been written by people that were not laid off, but were then asked to do all the work of the people that were there and using AI and everything else, and they were going to pay them double to do the work. And this one woman said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take this money with these, friends that I've been working with, and you got rid of them, and now I'm here. I'm not going to do it. So she quit. So I don't know how successful that feeling of CEOs, like, okay, we're just going to force it. We don't have the productivity there. We're going to force the productivity by getting rid of people. I don't think that's going to take off in a big, broad way, personally. But there will be an evolution of things that will happen, and especially in the startup kind of thing, you won't need as many. And if you look at how startups were, let's say going back 20 years ago, you had to get a loan from banks to fund your servers, right? Because you had to buy your own servers, you had to buy your own workstations. And now you use the cloud. If you need more power, you pop another server on remotely. And the lightweight computers that you need to get are less expensive than they used to be. And now it's even, with using AI to maybe not need as many programmers, it's going to be even easier and lower cost of capital to go and get started up. So I think that's where the transformation is going to be, is there's going to be more of these, businesses starting up. That doesn't mean they're all going to make it, right? But I think we don't know exactly how it's going to shake out, but I don't see companies just all of a sudden getting rid of all of these folks.
Can I? So, oh, I'm sorry, may I?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to tell a little story. It's only one data point, but it's a data point. So a few weeks ago, Sal Khan of Khan Academy was at MathWorks giving a talk. He's fantastic. If you ever have a chance to see him, do it. And he was asked the question, okay, well, is AI going to essentially reduce your workforce? And he said, well, if I've got an employee and he makes him or herself 5x more effective by using AI, I'm going to give that individual more responsibility and not less. Now, again, I don't know that all CEOs are going to think that way, but we have at least one data point where one CEO thinks that way.
I have one more thing there. One more thing to add on that. We had a talk a few weeks ago from someone at LinkedIn, and what they're trialing as an organizational structure is merging different organizations. So the first merge that they're doing is with their product teams and their design teams. So instead of having a team of product managers and a team of designers, it's going to be merged into one role. And that is like a first step in a merge with the broader engineering teams as well. So you're going to have teams of people who are able to do more things because of the tools they have access to. And I think engineers in general are going to be the best suited because they're adaptable and have the technical knowledge to be more successful across role types.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on the point Joel made, taking this from an economic analysis standpoint. Companies have these specific, and visual engineers, I'm an engineer. Companies have the specific demand for engineering. There's an amount of engineering that they need to aggregate, and there's an amount of supply, and that drives the price. You add AI, all of a sudden, the supply of engineering goes through the roof because everyone has access to this tool that makes them 5 times more effective. What's going to happen? Right? The money that the engineer is going to make is going to go down, at least on a temporary basis. Who would be wrong?
Can I give a structural engineering example? I'm going to give a structural engineering example. So there's a firm called Thornton Tomasetti, and they're structural engineers. They also do mechanical engineering and other plumbing engineering, et cetera, but mostly AEC trades. And what they have done is they have created their own model that basically allows them to do the structural analysis with data sets that they've built in a fraction of the time that it would have taken through traditional analysis. They're charging clients the same amount. So
money.
Who gets the money? The company.
Yeah, the company, not the worker.
Right, so I don't know that. At a certain point, you're saying prices will go down? Not necessarily in the professional services.
The salaries will go down, not the cost of the total engineering output. Because you're going to have, it costs this much to deliver engineering output now. You add AI, salary, AI, cost is the same, output might be the same, output might be more, but the salary portion will go down. And as graduates for RPI, that's what I care about. I got 4 kids, high school to 6th grade. That's why I'm here. I'm worried about this. So I want to know more.
Pete, sorry, you make a multi-class of 84. I run 2 companies, one's Spatial Surgical, one's a Yammelger, Nanopure, Colin for Vince Migo. And I don't know your name. Here.
Me?
Tom, how's that direction? Right, so we're not going to, my companies, we're not gonna like fire people. You're saying like, oh, you're gonna fire, no, we don't fire people, right? So but you're also correct, we were much more efficient. Right? So we can just take a PDF with the snipping tool, and we could just draw a box around our electronic circuit, and you just say, okay, clip it, and you just send it to ChatGPT, and you just say, okay, what are the options here for X, Y, and Z? And it comes back with all 3 electronic design options. You don't need to hire me, right? So we have a design for, we could make a laser for cleaning your teeth, right? So we just want to say, okay, well, we just want to like monitor closed, I'm trying to get this simple, sorry. We're a monitor, it's technical audience, how we know you to do this. We want to monitor in a closed loop fashion, right? What's happening, and we want to make sure that we control the energy and the matter that we want to do, right? So here's our software. So we want to just monitor and see what happens. It comes back, ChatGPT comes back with like 3 or 4 different options for you to program it. I'm not going to lay anybody off, but the fact that I was going to hire 3 or 4 more people, that's just gone. You know, it's just like Tom's right. I mean, it's like, why would you hire anybody? Like, we used to hire. I raised my first money in 2002, right? 24 years ago. From 2002, you just send a business plan to a VC. Nobody ever raised money for startups and from a bank. Sorry.
No. You still had a loan that was back, Silicon Valley, right? Remember that?
Extremely rare. Yeah. Extremely rare, right? Somebody could out of Boston with a business plan. We tip into VCs and you go see 4, 5, 6 over a few days, and they would just give you money for this or for that, right? You know, that's all gone these days, right? You just can't do that. So the money is very tight, right? There's everybody vying for the money. There's 1,000 different startups, right? And so you're just not going to hire you're just not going to hire the engineers anymore. You don't need them anymore, right? I mean, it's absolutely the technology from markup. You just take a PDF of your schematic, and you just clip a little bit out, and you stick it on ChatGPT. And it gives you 3 different options that are gonna like make it better for you. And you think, we've had a situation where ChatGPT says, "Oh, you're using this TI chip. Well, you could use that GI chip, or you could use that TI chip, and the advantages and disadvantages using those are 2 other." And we used to hire engineers, and we used to hire consultants. We used to spend $20,000, $30,000 to get that information, and you just don't need to do it anymore. You just, again, I don't think there's a whole bunch of people that be fired, but the kids, how the hell is he graduate from MIT? How he graduated from MIT? We go have dinners and lunches and parties. So nobody's hiring software engineers. And just like all the parents are asking like, "Hey, what's your son do? What you're doing?" "Oh, software." Just nobody's like, "Well, what's hiring do?"
I can say a quick comment to that. So when was the sexiest job of the century created? Anybody know what that was deemed by Harvard? So 13, 14 years ago, it was a data scientist, which wasn't a job before 2012, basically, right?
That's a great example. Data science. I have a friend who's a data scientist, graduated in WEI, can't find a job.
So the creation of a new category.
ChatGPT just does it. You don't need it anymore.
So this rapid adoption of something that's going to change the current job is certainly impactful.
1984, every single software engineer, we had, I was a fraternity, we had a wall that has like lines of letters offering them jobs. Today, you stay by nada.
Right. So I think, has anyone heard of what a vibe coder is? Because that's a job too now, right? That didn't exist like 2 years ago. So I think a big part of this is there will be categories of people who get jobs that didn't exist. A data scientist, obviously, is someone who learned a lot of mathematics and had a whole bunch of skill sets that were very STEM oriented. So those are coming faster than ever, and that rate of change, which I think someone said on the panel recently, is certainly like disruptive, but the same ability to adapt and learn will apply to a new category, which is not counted towards a software engineer per se. And I think that's, for me, I was told, and I think it's correct by a smart person, that optimism makes you a lot more money than pessimism. So ultimately, those jobs created are going to drive some jobs you don't even know that exist, right? Like what's a focus on LLM mean 5 years ago? I mean, it means something, and I can appreciate it's a lot of hard work, but it didn't exist 5 years ago, right? Frontier Labs, that wasn't even a word 3 years ago.
I think just the one other thing I would say to both, and both from an economics.
Say the microphone so we can.
He's going.
You got it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So just from an economic standpoint, I mean, these business changes are not done in a vacuum either, right? So your business, what's to stop 10 other competitors from challenging you now, right? So the barriers to entry are dropping, so there's more competition, and so you're looking for a marginal gain, right? So now the margins get tighter in terms of the talent and things like that. But it's not just like, one company suddenly has access to ChatGPT and they don't need employees anymore, because now everybody does. So you've got to be that much better, and you've got to innovate. And this is where new jobs, new industries. Think of if you talk to Sean about his companies that he's come up with, right? These things are new and they're innovative. And I think the biggest thing is, we talk about durable skills and being as flexible as possible and things like that. We're shooting for these jobs 5 years from now. That it is a challenge, right? But it's something that everyone is grappling with.
So I guess I have a question to the gentleman that was asking. So I don't know if you need the microphone or not, but I'm just curious, when you get these design alternatives from ChatGPT, how do you evaluate those options?
The design alternatives are fabulous. The ChatGPT suggests the different.
No, but how do you evaluate them before? I mean, you take them and put them into patients' mouths without testing them?
No, of course not.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking. How do you validate them?
Yeah, see, the ChatGPT cell, you have to use a different chip, and you go change this resistor and capacitor, right? So it's just.
So do you then go and test those changes?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But it's just a board. We just say it's like 10 minutes, right? Your example of a data scientist is a great example, right?
But who's doing this and who's doing it 10 minutes in? Who's doing the 10 minutes?
I said that we're not going to fire anybody.
Okay.
We're just not going to hire anybody.
Yeah.
Because the amount of labor that we need is just on, and also the consultants is just on, down significantly, right? And your example is great, but the data scientists, if you look around, you just don't meet anyone that 5 years ago, every data scientist was like getting a million job offers now. So you just have to look at like what ChatGPT or whatever AI does well, and what they do well is what's in a book. So I still have my heat transfer book from Rensselaer, right? I still have my thermal book from Rensselaer, right? Right, it's about slide and thermal too. Yeah, that's right. I still open it up. I still looked at it. But you know when you do it, because it does that. So right, anything that's in a book, like data science or like electronics, even some of the software. Now we've had another software engineer in my company quit because he went to go work for an AI company. So we hired someone else to replace him. My point is, we're not increasing employment, right? I mean, and there are new jobs, right? No doubt about it, right? And I've been starting companies since, I don't know, 25 years ago. So, it is unbelievable, right? It really, because I just started using it a little bit, maybe like 6 months ago, and it's incredible. And then I made my engineers use it. We have a Rensselaer software guy. I made him put his software in there and see what it said. It's incredible, guys. It really is.
Well, I think that's what we've been talking about, is that there is this new world, and then it's a question of where those jobs are going to be. Because at the same time that we have this once-in-a-generation change from a technology standpoint, you also have unprecedented changes in our demographics as a country and really worldwide. So we're an aging population. I can certainly count myself into that. And there's more and more people retiring from jobs. And so, the folks that have been in a job for a long period of time, they may not be as resilient or adaptable to doing new things as some of the younger folks that are coming in and coming out from school ready to go with those. So I don't know that there's a clear-cut situation one way or the other. It's definitely going to have an impact. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question particularly for Brian. As a high school student, one of the difficulties I've noticed among my peers with public AI websites like ChatGPT is that the line between help and cheating is an increasing worry. Even if students are taught proper usage guidelines, there's still a risk that students may be pressured due to time constraints or high expectations to use AI to cheat. But because those interactions with AI are outside of the school's control, in what ways will schools ensure that students truly understand the material as that line becomes more blurry with every coming year?
Yeah, so that's a good question, really good question. And there's no really easy answer. But it's funny. So I'll give you a couple of anecdotes. So one, I had mentioned this financial computation class that I'm teaching. And roll back 10 years ago, I would give them in-class exams like, all right, we did actually use MATLAB when I first started teaching in. So I would have them, here's your questions. You have to sit there, we had proctors, watch them do their, laptops and everything. And then it became easy to cheat on the laptop, so then we kind of changed that up. And then when AI came around, I couldn't even get take-home projects or anything anymore, right? So we've reverted to basically what I do is I'll give them a take-home risk project, whatever it is, come back, that's 50% of your grade, basically to make sure you do it, and then here is the solutions, and now you have to fix the code by hand to make sure you understand what you're doing. So we're actually going back in a lot of ways to paper tests, to as knowledge checks. But the flip side is the AI allows the students to do so much more and learn so much more to take time to do other things. And that is a tremendously powerful asset. So we have we have clubs. We have a club, in the finance program, for example, engineering, the same thing. ARCOS is one thing for Rensselaer RPI, Center for Open Source Software, right? The same thing. We have a group of students managing like $250,000. And so using AI to get down to some other things helps them free them up to some time to actually do these things, which are a little bit arguably more important. Now, the other thing that I would say is that it is very easy to tell. So anyone that's been in the technical side of the industry, it's very easy to tell when people know what they're talking about once you're in the industry. So I worked for the Treasury, I went to banks and all this stuff right after the crisis, and you learn these things very quickly. So when students present, things come across, right? And so last night I teach a student managed fund class, so basically a class around the fund, and all the students have to do a stock pitch, right? They choose a company and they give a pitch, right? 3 students presented last night. 2 of them used, I strongly suspect like 99%, that they used the Claude financial analytics package to basically prepare their slides. It's fine by me. One of the students, I asked him questions, knew what he was talking about, had it all set, good to go, right? And again, it's not a perfect thing, but next student came up, same thing. He answered some questions about the company. I forget what the company was, but he goes through the whole presentation, and then, at the end, you have to give like your worst case, expected, and then the bullish case for the stock. And he said, okay, my expected stock price is $700. Worst case is $500. Best case scenario year out is $1,200. This is a definite buy, right? So I'm sitting there like with real data in front of me. And I look it up and I'm like, well, the stock closed at $1,500 today. Like, how did that come? And it's a silly story. Professors will know there are different ways to assess things. And the trick is really to get students to try and motivate themselves to learn, right? You have to take some of it on yourself, right? And one of the things about coming to a place like RPI or whatever other schools you're applying to, I'm sure that they're comparable schools, is that you're going to be surrounded by a lot of people that want to learn. And you can fake it using ChatGPT and this stuff in class, and you can get by and you can graduate. Like if you just put ChatGPT through RPI, you get through, right? Or Claude or whatever. But you're selling yourself short, and you're wasting someone's money. But mainly your own, right? It's a huge opportunity cost. And so that's kind of the way that we approach it, is, at least I do in my classes, it's kind of up to you. I mean, you guys are adults to a certain extent. I teach more grad students, so that it's a little bit easier to tell them that, but so.
I'd like to follow up on that a little bit. So after RPI, I got a master's degree in educational technology, because a lot of what I do is look at the design of educational spaces and understanding sort of the thinking behind the teaching. And it's really about assessment. So in many cases, tests, essays, all of that have been a very efficient way over the past, many, many years to test whether someone knows knowledge or not. And I think we're moving into a new era where assessment has to be more dynamic, it has to be more personalized, just like the learning will be more dynamic and personalized. And exactly, Brian, those were great points. In presenting, you either know it or you don't. And to be able to be flexible, that's actually teaching you life skills to be able to exercise your creative and critical thinking skills, as well as sort of knowing when to trust or to override the AI. That's a critical skill, to be able to discern that. I kind of laughed when you asked when you asked the question in architecture, because like you use Nana Banana or any other image generation in architecture, and you try and present that, they're gonna rip you apart. I mean, they know, right? So I think it's really about learning the skills and also, as a professor, knowing how to assess the skills. And that's where it's going to change.
I got to add one thing to that because there's a great point. I know you're the learner too, right? I remember thinking that at school, like, I'm the one paying for this. I should probably not waste my money. But in practice for I've been in enterprise, right, in the corporate world, I encourage everyone to use the tools, but if it's coming out where this stuff's not good, say it's code or say it's a presentation, right, to go outside the classroom, there have been cases where it was 4 weeks in, it's this person is not a fit for this team, and that's a reality of the world, right? Or this person can use the tools and they're accelerating and they should get a promotion. So it translates from the classroom directly into the real world where you can accelerate faster than ever. We had an example of a never before in product. She became a superstar and we were accelerating her, and other developers who were interviewed kind of incorrectly and tried to pass off, you can go through RPI and get the degree. They were just going through the motions, and it will come and get you, I guess is the point, right? Faster maybe than before.
Another question, yeah.
I'm Mike, class of 95. So back in the olden times, the baby engineer or programmer or what have you, your first day and your first job, you're debugging somebody else's code, not debugging somebody else's circuit, looking over somebody else's blueprints for something that is some bug somewhere. You're learning the basic ropes. These days, you can feed that to Claude, ChatGPT, what have you. So what's the baby engineer doing? How are they going to learn the skills necessary to become the senior engineer that can oversee Claude? And we have a recent grad who wants to answer.
Well, I was looking on a question I wanted to ask, namely, one of my pre-prepared questions, I jotted down. I can ask for people a prepared question and sound smart. But I was going to ask something akin to that on the grounds that certain bug fixing is mostly a way of getting to know the code base, right? If I'm being optimistic, optimism pays better than pessimism, and I hear.
Someone said that.
I suppose you could have a junior engineer chat with chat about the code base, get to know it better through interaction, and get working on actual design, more important elements later. That's the optimistic case.
The pessimistic case is the article I read maybe a month or so ago about a company that basically got rid of all of its junior engineers specifically because the senior engineers can feed the code in Claude and get the similar quality results for a lot less money. They weren't happy about it, but that's the.
I guess if I'm gonna convert into a pessimist, we are all at the mercy of management.
Always the case.
All right, do you have any other questions? Or did you want to jump in on?
Just of course here again, one data point. It does not define the world, but it's a data point. At MathWorks, there are somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 software developers that are employed there, that work on a whole host of disciplines, be it pharmaceutical, signal processing, wireless communications, you name it, automotive, avionics. There has not been a breath of any word of layoffs coming. Now, I do think that MathWorks is a remarkable company. We can go into that at a later time. But our CEO is talking about using AI, as we've talked about all night, as a lever to accelerate people's productivity, to get more done in the same amount of time. Now, and would you believe we are still hiring a little bit. So again, it's only one data point. I'm not going to claim that this therefore governs the world. I do want to give a little bit more optimism than pessimism.
Sorry, I just add one more thing. It's me again. Sorry, you're baking Naki in the fort. When I halfway through Ancillary, right, I was in hardball, right? They said, okay, you can come into your testing with one sheet of paper and you can write as small as you want. Now, I was
You all remember that?
MIT, and she said, what? I get out a sheet of paper for one cheat sheet, right? And everybody said, that's the downfall of engineering, having the cheat sheet, right? now everybody says, the downfall of engineering because it's AI, right? It's all in a book. That's the point. Whether it's on a cheat sheet or whether it's AI, it's all in a book. It's not the downfall of anything. All that is how well you memorize something versus how well you understand something, right?
Yes.
And so if you understand something and you're a junior engineer and you're a software engineer, your ChatGPT says, look, you could do it this way or that way or this way. It's just another way of understanding stuff. Nothing to do with memorizing, right? Whether it's a cheat sheet or AI, it's a progression. It's an advancement. My only point is, if you look at engineers right now, maybe it'll change, but right now, engineers leaving college, it's much, much harder to find a job than it was for me 40 years ago.
I'm not sure that that's restricted to engineering or STEM jobs. I think that there's a generational challenge in that, and our economy is slowing.
But in the 80s and the 90s, there was I had like 14 job offers. I had like 12 job offers.
Yep.
STEM back in the 80s and 90s, it was like you just got to pick what you wanted to do.
Well, I think that in other fields, there's a reduced hiring. If we just go and look at the Bureau of Labor statistics that I was showing, you would think with the moves that our administration has made, we would be seeing a lot of reshoring of manufacturing and a lot of manufacturing jobs. The reality is that's not happening.
And it's only been a year. We offshored for 30 years. You can't after like 12 months. Sorry, I don't mean to disagree with you a lot. If we offshore for 30 years, you can't like in 1 year say, oh, it's not all come back yet.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying it hasn't all come back. I'm saying,
Give it a little bit of time.
yeah.
The supply chain, energy security, US full supply chain. Yeah, we offshored everything. It's coming back, but it'll take time. It really will.
I think we have another question, right?
Yeah, I think just to build on some of the previous questions that have been asked recently, I think it's like there is a concern about the loss of institutional knowledge as senior engineers leave, and they are being replaced by junior engineers who are leveraging AI models that are training on that they're trying to solve questions that do not appear in any training model, and in the question, and certainly there is a concern on how do you address that, the loss of the institutional knowledge over time. And I think it's like my question kind of builds into that in terms of what are we doing to address the governance issues. For example, I work in data engineering, and I work in a lot of regulated industries where up until recently, it's like use of AI has been strongly discouraged because of the risk of accidental disclosure, which would trigger all sorts of penalties for HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, and who knows what, and all sorts of different regulations. So I think it's like to kind of build upon that is like, how are we training our AI engineers to be able to deal with these intangible issues?
Anybody want to jump into that one?
Oh, not a panacea, but something I mentioned earlier this evening was Olama. It is one of what they call standalone LLMs. You go ahead and pull that Ethernet cord, turn off that Wi-Fi, whatever you need on your PC, and now you have an LLM that's living right there on your PC, and it is disconnected from the world. That does provide a measure of security and isolation. Now, is everyone going to be able to do that? No. But for people who are paranoid, and rightfully so, about data breaches and insecurity, that can be one solution.
I think the more general question, as you're bringing up, though, is how do we train people in a given field for the experience that they need to judge the output of some of these AI tools and whatnot. And I'm in mergers and acquisitions these days, and so I work with a lot of technical companies. I'm actually selling a structural engineering company right now. We were talking about structural engineering before, but there was a conference I was in of M&A folks, mergers and acquisitions folks, back in January, and we had a roundtable about how these different disciplines were using artificial intelligence. And we had accountants, we had attorneys and whatnot, and there was very interesting dialogue. So, and one of them from a large accounting firm, they had just rolled out AI tools. They had everybody fly into LA and they did this week-long training on how they were going to be using these tools to do a lot of what entry-level accountants would have been doing in the past. And so, I asked him at this roundtable, I said, how do you get new people then to get up to speed? And his answer was, we're throwing a lot more responsibility at them coming right out of school than they're probably ready for. But that's what we're doing. And so, in accounting, there's regulatory issues and everything else. They need to be held to certain standards. It's the same thing in engineering. So it is going to be a little bit scary. I think the distinction that was made earlier before memorizing versus understanding is really key. And, in accounting, doing a bunch of grunt work over and over again for a year makes you really good at understanding, what it takes to go and put that balance sheet together or whatever, understanding underlying assets and how things could be phony and whatever. So they develop that sense of knowledge, and it's the same thing for a young engineer looking at code and finding bugs to get a handle on whatever. It's that thing, and I think that's one of the challenges that this next generation is going to be facing. That you're going to be given more responsibility more quickly when you do get out into industry, and it's going to be a challenge. Now, the tools are going to help you, but it's all, that ability of understanding when these three alternatives that AI came up with, which one is really the best, that's something that takes some experience and intuition. And it's going to be a challenge, I think, for new folks going into those roles. It might be less repetitive than those of us that started earlier, have been through, but it's going to be a different world for them.
Jake, do you have time for one more question?
Absolutely.
This is a question for Ray. So, having had a luxury of actually studying AI, being this AI boom, I'm curious what your thoughts are in where AI is going to be, not the impact of AI, but specifically the technology. How far can it go? What are your predictions and thoughts? Is it going to plateau, or in 5 years or 10 years, 20 years? Like, how far can it go? What could it possibly do? Like, where could the blossom get into?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So, my perspective of AI. So now we have so many embodied AI, robots, Elon Musk does a lot of stuff on this robot. So I think AI can literally do everything, probably in next 20 years. Help us to do our housework and help us to do the research, kind of even for do the math study and develop some algorithm, develop those kind of research. Probably there will be a no research professor in the future. AI gonna replace them. I don't know. Yeah, let's see.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, that's it.
I'm going to change this a little bit. So we talk about AI as a uniform entity, but we have 4 or 5 companies making it. Are they all using the same algorithms and the same thing? That's data.
And do they produce different results? And how do you tell what the results are and whether you're the same? Or does somebody run 5 different questions, the same question with 5 different platforms to see what you get? And then, so if you're not the same, how do you interpret it? Because you have no idea what it's doing inside.
Want to say that? You looking at Brian? No, so that's real good there. What are you looking at? Okay, which one?
Well, no, because you're shocked, because you're.
Sorry, you stole me right under the bus. They are definitely different companies, I'll tell you that. Different algorithms. I'll say, from my experience, I have actually run them all in tandem. We were talking earlier with Mike about like what tools I use, which are slightly different than his, but I'll say, and I hope no one works at Microsoft, but I do not like Microsoft AI anything. It's terrible, just to put that out there. So everything that I've done has been like 2.5 years. I've run them side by side, right? So literally looking at the outputs to see what's going to work for me, which I think, but in my half joke, Microsoft probably does work for some people, right? It's its own thing. I can tell you, like, there's a certain thing I've honed on. I mean, that is where I think, from my practical experience, I need to. But I can imagine, what did we just say, the MathWorks Copilot versus Microsoft Copilot versus maybe an RPI GPT, which I know they're actually working on at the RPAI Club. So all those things I think is applicable to the domain, right? So ultimately, right, you have 5 like foundation companies, you can splinter off of it, you have open source models, and I think your question for me is the question of like, what's going to work in my domain? So that's a part of maybe the answer, and maybe Brian knows how to get all the answer.
You're throwing me back on. No, I'll actually tie both these 2 last questions together with an example, I think. And so the example is that even the models can talk to each other, right? And so you can use like Claude versus ChatGPT, and you can iterate on these things, right? And so our dean, Liat, actually, he's trained as a computer scientist and economist, right? And so we were talking a few weeks ago on like a Wednesday. He's like, yeah, I figured out how this new way to get these LLMs to talk to each other to do like theoretical research, economics research. If you ever read a theoretical economics paper, it's not
Thrilling stuff.
Yes. So this is on like a Wednesday morning, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then he's like, what are you working on? I'm working on something in the private credit markets. If you don't read the news, it's a key topic right now. And so he's going through it. So then he emails me and a co-author Friday night. He goes, all right, here's iteration 1 on this paper and this paper. He's got 2 60-page papers with proofs and some empirical work, citations. Literally, he spent 2 days writing these papers, which, you read through them, then, of course we have to go through them, and you need some domain expertise to actually assess these things. But that's in 2 days. This would take a year of work, 6 months ago. And so, you talk about research professors, it's interesting, right? It's scary in one hand, but it's also then the ethics of it. Then what do you do about publishing these things? And, that there's a whole bunch of issues, right? So we're dealing with these in our professional lives or, on the research side, but I don't have a good answer to it, but I would say that, that these are very, very powerful tools right now. Yeah. And, Rick's assessment's a little bit frightening. You heard about the Anthropic model that didn't get released this week. So that's all I've got.
So another example, I also belong to the Entrepreneurials Network, ENET, Boston ENET, and it's related to the IEEE. I'm still a member of the IEEE. And we get entrepreneurs in there, pitching ideas, or others talking about, some of the things that they've accomplished. And there's this husband and wife team that developed their own AI application for law. And it's called Describe.com, describe with a Y instead of an I. And the 2 of them did it, and it's unbelievable. My point is, it's not just horizontal, huge companies, but people that can go into a specific niche and develop tools that solve a unique problem in that niche much faster and with less capital and less resources than they've been able to do before. They, over the course of a couple of years, ingested all of the published case law for all 50 states and all the federal cases, and can go and spit out references with footnotes and whatnot, right? They're not making up cases, but it's truly amazing, and they've gone head to head against LexisNexis and some of these other companies that have been out there for a long time and beat down in competitions. And it's a husband and wife team. It's amazing. So there are things like that. We're talking about entrepreneurs and how they may start up and they, have a whole advanced capability to draw on. It will take less to go and start up some of these efforts. That's a good example just here in the Boston area. I think we're probably at a good stopping point here, but I want to thank everybody for coming and attending, and thank you most of all to our 7 panelists here. Can we give them a round of applause? And to our prospective students with some big decisions in front of them, I speak for myself, and I'm sure many of the others here would be happy to chat with you afterwards if you have any other questions. But we wish you all the best in your decisions and in your future career. And thanks again for being here.